Hello, Goodreads. Love it or hate it, it's here for us all, and I am going to dive into my lowest rated books according to Goodreads. Let's see if I agree or not. Hello, hello, hello. My name is Nakia. Welcome to my channel. So yes, as I said in the intro, I thought about doing this video because I've seen a couple people do it here and there on booktube, and it always just seems interesting to see if you agree with what Goodreads says. Like I said, love it or hate it. And for this video, I wanted to see if I agree with my lowest rated books on my red shelf on Goodreads. So it should be interesting. One thing I already know from making my list for this video is that a lot of these books are horror books. So, what does that say? I don't know how to choose horror books, or horror books are just rated low in general. I don't know. Let's get into it though. I was actually surprised when I put this list together by what was at the bottom compared to what I probably thought was at the bottom. I don't know that I thought anything, but let's just see. At the very, very bottom of my list, I have my notes here on my phone. My lowest rated book that I've read according to the Goodreads average rating is The Visitor by Sergio Gomez. Now, if you don't know, this is a horror novella. It takes place around Christmas time. I thought it was pretty fun. It's basically, I don't want to give anything away, but there's some people who get stuck in a snowstorm at this diner, and then all hell breaks loose. You can see by the picture that we may be dealing with some extraterrestrials, whatnot. So, the average rating according to Goodreads for this book is a 3.42. What did I rate it? In case you don't remember, I gave this one 3 stars. So I'm pretty close to Goodreads. I mean, for me, 3 stars is not bad. 3 stars means I had fun with it. It was fine. It was average, nothing to write home about, but I enjoyed my time with it, and that's where I'd put it. 3.42 is closer to 3.5. I'm a little bit lower, so I guess I agree with that. I'm just gonna go with that. I don't think I'm lower. I'm gonna say I agree with that. So let's move on to the next one. Now this next one, I talked about this in my reading 1-star reviews for my favorite books video. If you haven't watched that, I will link it here. But this one, I do take offense to. This one is 12 Nights at House by J.W. Acker. Now, like I said, I have talked about this book enough. The average rating on Goodreads for this one was 3.45. Clearly, I do not agree. I gave it 4 stars. Now, this one is a haunted house story. It's basically about this guy who decides to go spend 12 nights at this haunted house called House. He's writing a book, and he brings along his friend Felix, and things happen. I actually think he was supposed to spend 13 nights there, so that also kind of tells you a little something. But like I said, haunted house story. I enjoyed the writing. I do know some of the complaints people have is that it was too much talking, and they were playing this game called Film Fight, something like that, where they were going back and forth talking about favorite horror movies, and people thought that was too much, and it was the author trying to show off his knowledge of horror books. Clearly, I disagree. I love that part of the book. I love the friendship between, I don't even remember now, was the friend Felix or was the main character Felix? Whatever. The 2 friends, I enjoyed their friendship, so I enjoyed all of that. I also found parts creepy. I also know people thought that the author was racist or was trying to insert some racism because the main character's friend is a Black man, and again, as a Black woman, I did not feel that way. I enjoyed that. I liked that part of the book. It was a nice little treat to me. So yeah, my only complaint, and I know some people thought this, but I feel like it was a minority of us. My only complaint was just some weird sexual stuff that was in the book that I was just kind of like, why is that in there? Because if that wasn't in there, it would have been 5 stars for me. So again, clearly I disagree. Let's move on. All right, next one. I was a little bit surprised by this one because I thought I was in the minority with this, but this one is You Have Arrived at Your Destination by Amor Towles. Now, this was part of the Forward collection on Amazon, exclusively on Amazon. It's a novella. Because it's pretty short, I don't want to give too much away, but I really was intrigued by the concept of this book. It was about this couple, and this is a future world where you can go to this facility and handpick your child's genes when you want to go through fertility treatments. And I mean handpick, like you can pick the whole life they're going to have. They show you a presentation of what the different versions of their life can be, and you can pick which one you want them to have. So I thought that was so fascinating. But for me, the ending fell apart, and that's what ruined it for me. So the average rating on Goodreads was 3.45 stars, same as 12 Nights at House. This one I was lower. I gave it 2 stars. So I thought it was so promising, but the ending, like all of that part with the tech and us finding about the fertility, and we follow the husband of this couple as he goes to find out I think the wife had picked out like 3 different lives for their potential child. And he goes to watch the presentation about these 3 lives to figure out which one they want to go with. And that part I loved, but it was not enough of the story. After he leaves the fertility clinic is when it just went downhill for me. And then the very ending, I was like, what? I was confused. For this to be a novella, I should be able to follow it. It shouldn't be too confusing. Not that many pages. So that's why I gave it 2 stars. It was just okay for me. Now, I generally tend to go with the Goodreads rating system. They have like 1 is I didn't like it, 2 is it was just okay, 3 is I liked it, 4 is I really liked it, and I think 5 is I loved it. So I generally tend to stick with those. And then I can get into this in another video about like why I specifically rate things the way I do, because I know some people go off enjoyment, some people get more technical with like plot and characters and all that stuff. So I can get into that a little more in another video. If you like, let me know in the comments below. But for now, like I said, that's mainly what I go with. So for this one, I gave it 2 because it was just okay to me. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, we have the infamous Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. Now, if you're new here and you don't know, I talked about this book enough. Talked about it last year in my worst books of 2021 video. Link it here. It was not the worst. Now, I rarely rate a book 1 star. I generally get to at least 2 if I finish it. This one was so promising. You see the cover. By this cover, I thought I was getting a book about some scary mannequins, because that's what we think from this cover. This was so short, I don't want to give anything away, but this was about a bunch of friends who find this mannequin and they decide to play a prank on another one of their friends using this mannequin. And then all things are supposed to happen after that. Now, like I said, my main issue with this book is the advertisement, the marketing, and not getting what I want. If I buckle in and think I'm getting a book about some creepy mannequins, that's what I want. I don't want anything else. If I buckle in and think I'm getting a haunted motel book, that's what I want. And don't tell me it's a haunted motel book and don't make the cover look like it's a haunted motel book. Clearly I'm talking about something else. If you know my channel, you know what I'm talking about. Back to this one. Look at this cover. And someone else mentioned that it says mannequins, plural. We did not get mannequins, plural. And this was just a different story altogether that I did not sign up for, because if I had known that's what it was about, I would not have read it. Now, I did enjoy his writing enough to get through the whole book, but it was also one of those endings where I got to the end and I was like, what the hell did I just read, for the love of God? So, not sure if I said this yet, but the average rating on Goodreads was 3.48. Close to 3.5. I gave it 2 stars. It was just okay. I feel like now it's being generous. No, like I said, I enjoyed the writing, so that's why I gave it 2 stars, but I just did not get what I wanted, so I wasn't happy. Let's move on. Next up, this one I was also surprised was lower on my list or the average ratings, because a lot of people recommended this book to me. Actually, I read it on a recommendation from my booktube buddy, Paulina, and a lot of people said this is one of the scariest books they've read, but I'm speaking of The Patient by Jasper DeWitt. This one is supposed to be about this patient who has been at this mental facility since he was a kid. And everybody who goes to work with him, therapists, nurses, orderlies, all that good stuff, they end up having some mental issues themselves and they have to be removed. And so we follow this doctor who comes in and he decides he is going to figure out what's wrong with this man, what is up with him. But this guy is very strange. This is a horror book, not a thriller. So the average rating on Goodreads is 3.51. And this is one that I am right there. I gave it 3.5 stars as well. This was very creepy. Very. I agree with that. It was pretty easy to read. The very beginning started off a little slow for me. Once the doctor got to the mental facility, it picked up from there on. My issue was that there were some things in there that I just don't like in my reading. Incest and pedophilia and child sexual abuse and things like that I just don't like to read about. There was also some animal abuse. Don't like that either. So those things brought it way down for me. If those things weren't in it, it would have probably been 5 stars or 4.5, but those just brought it down for me. I actually don't know what other people had to say about this one, what their issues were, why it was not rated higher. But like I said, that's what I can tell you for me. So let's move on. All right, we have another one that is controversial. I don't know. I thought it was fine, but a lot of people hate this book, and I am not in that camp. But by Goodreads, it's not hated, but it's not one of this author's best rated books either. And I'm speaking of Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This one has an average rating of 3.51 on Goodreads. I gave it 3 stars, so I'm slightly lower than the average being 3.5. But I do hear the rumblings in the streets, and people just, like I said, DNF'd it, didn't like it, can't stand it, thought it was the worst book of the year. I had fun with it. Like I said, I flew through it. I was entertained. This one is about a young lady who is in college, and supposedly there's this campus killer on the loose. And people think that her roommate could also have been killed by this campus killer. So she is having a hard time dealing with grief, and she decides she just needs to get away from the school and get back home and take some time off. So she can't wait for the semester to end so her boyfriend can give her a ride. So she placed a message on this campus board, bulletin board thing, posting that she needs a ride to get back home. And someone comes up to her, this gentleman, and says, "I can give you a ride." Now, once you know the concept, don't complain, because to me, she's already not being the smartest. So if you are along for that, I just don't know what else you expected, because already it's like, why would you ride with this dude? You don't know him, and there's a campus killer on the loose. But she does it. So the whole thing is she gets in the car with this guy, and she starts to think that he could be the campus killer. And it's like, how can she get out? How can she survive the night? Dun, dun, dun. Now, like others, I do feel like this book fell apart at the end. It just got ridiculous. When we got to the end, the twists and stuff that came about. Who the killer was not a surprise, because it's a small cast of characters. So, you end up narrowing it down as you're going, because you're like, I don't think it's this person. I don't think it's this person. And by process of elimination, you could probably figure out who it is. So I think that was another one. I didn't like that the killer was predictable. But like I said, the main thing is that it was just ridiculous for me at the end. And then there were a couple twists that came at the very, very end. I think it's the epilogue that were just one just irritated me, because it's one of those twists that kind of negates things that happen in the book or makes you question what you read. I don't like that. Don't do that. And then another one a lot of people had an issue with, and I don't want to spoil anything, but that's the reason why a lot of people hated this book. So for me, like I said, I still gave it 3 stars, because I thought it was, I liked it, but I didn't love it. And now that I've read almost all of his books, it's still one of my favorites, because some of his other ones I really didn't like. Stay tuned for those in another video. Let's move on. Next up, we have a book by an author that was a childhood favorite of mine. And this was my first visit back into his world, his writing, since I was a kid. So I was excited about it. Unfortunately, I was let down. But I'm speaking of Slumber Party by Christopher Pike. Now, this one is about a group of kids who go away on a ski trip. You can't tell by this cover, but there is another one with the snowy and whatnot. I got the one with the girl with the fire. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is the same typical thing. There's a killer, and we got to figure out who it is, from what I remember. I don't remember much, so that already tells you, and I already said it wasn't that enjoyable for me. The average rating on Goodreads was 3.54. I gave it 2 stars. This was so YA. And I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, so I think back then I probably would have loved it, because like I said, I loved Christopher Pike back then. But now that I'm older, it just was too young for me. The reveals, the twists were so predictable. It just was so ridiculous to me. So I just thought it was okay. Like I said, I gave it 2 stars. I can barely remember anything about it. Things in it were laughable at the time that I read it. So yeah, I was so disappointed. And I have not read another Christopher Pike book since. If you have one that you recommend, let me know. But like I said, that one was so disappointing that I just didn't want to revisit him again. And as you already know, if you're new here, you're gonna know I am not feeling so great about YA lately. So I don't know that I will read any more of his. But anyway, I am going to skip the next lowest rated book on my list, because you don't know how I feel about it yet. And I'm speaking of Book of Night. And like I said, I just read it. I have not posted a review. I have not done my wrap up yet, but stay tuned to see how I feel about that in the future. Okay. Next up, we have Nightmare by Chad Nicholas. Now, this one I was also surprised it was lower on the list. When I read it, it had really great reviews on Goodreads. So I guess the more people have read it, the average has come down. But for me, I really enjoyed this book. Now, this is a psychological horror, which I love. 12 Nights at Rotter House was similar. The synopsis is very vague, and you can't really say a lot about it without giving a lot away. But it's just basically about this man who is starting to have visions. He's starting to see things. Weird things are happening. Like he's in his house and pictures are moved, or people are missing from the pictures that he remembers. You don't know if you can trust him or not. Unreliable narrator. And that's really all I can say without giving a lot away. But like I said, I really enjoyed this book. I do know some of the criticisms I've seen on Goodreads, or some people were complaining about the writing and thought things didn't make sense. But for me, I guess I didn't get that deep into it. I enjoyed it. I even did a talk with the author and also with Steve from Steve Talks Books. I will link it here in case you want to check it out. But the more I talked to the author about it, Chad Nicholas, the more I enjoyed it, because he really, to me, put a lot of thought into the book, and I could tell when I read it. So I disagreed. But the average rating on Goodreads was 3.63. I gave it 4 stars. Like I said, I enjoyed it. You can go check out my review on Goodreads, because like I said, I don't fully remember why I didn't give it 5 stars. But like I said, I really enjoyed it. So clearly I disagree with Goodreads. So anyway. Next up, we have another horror book. Like I said, I was surprised so many of these books are horror books. Maybe I just picked better thrillers and fantasy and sci-fi. But anyway, this one is another one that this author is beloved in the horror community. I don't know about this book. I've heard a lot of people say they don't like it. And I know like a lot of people's least favorite of this author. But it is Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. This one has such fond memories for me because it was back when I first got back into reading in 2020. I don't even know how I found out about this book. I think I saw it on someone's video. And when I saw the cover and that it was like the IKEA vibes and it was supposed to be a haunted house book set in an IKEA type store, I was like, yes, let me get it. And I was surprised they had it at my library. So like I said, this was one of the first books I read in 2020. Unfortunately, I was disappointed. The average rating on Goodreads is 3.66. I gave it 2 stars. Now, this book, like I said, had such a great premise. Like I said, it's these employees of this store. I don't remember the name of it, but there's some strange things that are happening in the store overnight. And when they come in the next day, they find all this weird stuff. So they decide to spend the night to find out what's happening at this store. I think it was like the Orsk store or something like that. Of course, they have like a seance and all this stuff, and all this weird and creepy stuff starts happening. I enjoyed Grady Hendrix's writing. That was not my issue. It was just, to me, once things started to kick off and more was supposed to start happening, his descriptions just went on and on and on to where I started skimming like, okay, we get it. She's stuck in this claustrophobic environment and we get it. There's rats and we get how claustrophobic it is. Let's move on. And then it just really fell apart for me when we found out the origin of what was going on with the store. And it was one of those things where the ghost, monster, entity, / ... I don't want to give things away, but did one of those things that you don't do in horror. They explained too much of why they were doing what they were doing, like a whole monologue, like pages and pages. And to me, now I'm not scared because you just told me too much about your backstory and your life and all that. Now I don't care as much. I prefer creepy characters where you don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They don't talk. Michael Myers, Jason, hello. Freddy Krueger is an exception because he's funny, but it's rare you can get those villains that can tell you things and it makes it worse. But most of the time, when they start talking, now I'm not scared anymore. So that's what ruined it for me with this. It was just those things. It was just, yeah. And I think I also didn't like the ending anyway. So I'm still debating about trying some more Grady Hendrix. Clearly that one turned me off enough because that was in 2020 and I haven't picked up another one of his books since. And I do know the ones that everybody talks about, but I'm still just kind of like, meh. So we'll see. Stay tuned if I decide to read any more from him. Now, the next one on my list, I'm also going to skip because it's a middle grade book, and I'm trying not to be too harsh on middle grade because, again, I'm not the target audience. Most of my reviews for middle grade books are pretty average anyway, average to high. So, again, I'm going to leave it there. You can go check my Goodreads if you want to see. It's called Dead of Winter, but like I said, I enjoyed it. That's all I'm going to say. Moving on. Last but not least on this list, this one I also was surprised was a little bit lower for average ratings, but it is Silent Night by R.L. Stine. Now, I don't know, maybe it's when people go to these vintage horror books, they expect more. I'm not sure. This one is about this spoiled brat named Reva Dalby, whose family owns this chain of department stores or like Macy's or something like that. So like I said, she's like rich and spoiled, and she's one of those mean, spoiled, rich girls, the way she's written. And so pranks start getting played on her, but because she's so unlikable, anybody could be doing it. And the pranks just start getting increasingly more dangerous. And so we have to figure out who's doing the pranks. And then there was also a subplot that I was not expecting that brought in some crime element that I was pleasantly surprised by. I read this during December of 2020, I believe. So to me, it was perfect for the holiday season. Now, the average rating for this on Goodreads was 3.68. I was higher. I gave it 4 stars. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. It wasn't perfect because it's YA and vintage YA at that. So of course there are going to be things in it that are a little bit outdated. I had a good time with it. I do still plan to read the sequel. I just wasn't in the mood for it this past Christmas, but I do plan to read the second book. But like I said, I enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. I really liked it. And I don't know why it has a 3.68. So anyway. All right, so I hope this was enjoyable for you. Like I said, I love to do these kind of videos where I review things on Goodreads, or mainly my Goodreads stuff. I just love to see if I agree with other readers and, stuff like that. And you guys seem to enjoy hearing my opinion. So like I said, hopefully this was enjoyable for you. Feel free to let me know in the comments how you feel about the Goodreads rating system. I know some people don't like it, but I know a lot of us are on there and we use it. So I enjoy it. I love giving ratings because that helps me out. And I love to look back and know how I felt about books. And I love to see how other people rate. Even when people send me friend requests, I do the compare books thing. I love to see how we agree and disagree about books. Yeah, so like I said, I always enjoy doing videos like this. If you have any other ones you want me to do in a similar vein, let me know. And as always, if you don't have a comment, but you just want to show me some love or let me know that you made it this far in the video, you can feel free to leave me a black heart in the comments. You know I love my black hearts. And as always, ways you can support my channel are always linked below. You can click on some links. Do me a little favor. And I think that is about it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. So until next time, snuggle up in your hideaway with a good book, unplug as much as possible, be kind to all kind, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.